Okay, thank you. So with me this evening, as usual, if you recall, we made a presentation for this gas system modernization program back in late March. And the program deals with the replacement of bare steel and cast iron main that we will be doing throughout East Brunswick. Back in March, we did our our presentation to introduce the program to you and talk about the streets that we were going to undertake the main replacement. Prior to that, obviously, we had our meetings. We had several meetings with Mr. Crusculo and Mr. Kipp, just kind of backdoor planning before we made our presentation to council. Today, what we wanted to do was give you an update. Obviously, the gas main replacement is in full swing in town. We wanted to try and accomplish three things tonight, if we could, with you. One is to, and the list that you have there is to give you an update of where we're at in terms of construction. Some streets have been completed, some are still working. We're actually a little ahead of schedule, but we'll talk about that momentarily. Item number two is we wanted to talk about the process and communication of where we're at. We obviously have a hotline that residents can call, but we want to ensure your residents that the work that is being done, they have a open line of communication, not only to PSEG, but to the project team if they have any questions. We also have been communicating quite extensively with Mr. Kipp as our construction company that's been working on it has been doing. And then we want to update you on the restoration process, the road restoration process. I think originally we talked, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I'll introduce my my colleagues that are with me today, but we talked about trying to phase the paving when we're done, when all the work is done. I mentioned a little bit ahead of schedule, and we may not have to phase. We might get the actual restoration work done a little bit ahead of schedule, but we'll talk about that momentarily. So with me, we have Dennis Brophy, who is with Waters and Bugby and in charge of the project from the construction side. And then from PSEG is Kelly Sutter, who is our project manager internally that's been running the GSMP2 project. And
the overall project is about 33,000 linear feet of main install. So at this point, we are at about 31,000 that we've completed of the actual main. That's open trench that you're seeing up and down the roads. So we're about 90% complete with that main install. Services, we had approximately 830. We're about 50% complete with those services, what we have remaining. So Frank mentioned earlier that we are ahead of schedule. When we presented last time, we were looking at a September, end of September final project closeout, and right now, based off the project, we should be 100% complete by mid-August, pending weather. We don't know what that's going to look like. That could be the only issue. We were able to throw a lot more resources at the project overall than originally anticipated. So from our side, we do believe we're making a lot of progress. We're working hand in hand with the town, the police. Everything is going smoothly with the project. So with that said, like Frank spoke, top to bottom, the first up to Wolf Ave, these streets are 100% complete. They're in what we call the settlement period at this point. So the permanent backfilling is done at this point, and it's hot patch, temporary restored for the settlement period. We allow 60 to 90 days. So kind of just to use these streets as an example right now. When we were here last time, we explained that we have an outreach process with the residents. So over the next week or so, we're going to be mailing out a letter that's specifically for these streets and these residents. They'll receive this letter, and in the letter, it just explains where we're at with the project. Construction is complete, but restoration steps still need to take place. That is inclusive of any grass restoration, any sidewalk restoration, any curbing restoration, as well as explaining our 60 to 90 day period, and that we will be back to restore the roads once we determine the final restoration project. So that is the more recent communication that will go out to the residents. The rest of the streets on here that are still under construction, we're sending out reverse 911 calls every 4 weeks to the residents to update them, to let them know that we're still actively working. Construction is not complete. We're giving them at least a week ahead still, trying to let them know when we're coming back on the street. So that's where we're at as far as communications with the residents at this point in the project.
Thank you. We started at the beginning, obviously, there were some roads that they're hitting that were paved as recent as last year.
Correct.
And PSEG acknowledged that, and I came up with a list, the last reconstruction date of every street that they're working on. And we have a formula roughly based on that. The newer roads, paved curb to curb. The ones that are almost as new, we want at least half the road paved, and then some of the roads that I plan on getting to and we're looking at for our paving program, restore the trench as best we can, and then we'll take over at the end. But I've been in touch with Kelly throughout the process and made sure she was aware of what we were looking at, and I think we're on the same page with that.
So I just want to be clear for residents that there is a plan in place that's going to repave all the roads, and that you'll be looking at some future date before you'd make those final determinations which roads are going to get what degree of repair. And so the main reason we don't want to publish any lists right now is because they are subject to change.
Change, correct.
Right, but residents need not fear that, as best as possible, things will be brought back to as good or better a shape as what they were to begin with.
Correct.
Right.
And all the information that we're sharing regarding these updates, we also, part of the communication process, and it's on your website, I believe, is we have a website, PSEG, that gives construction updates. So as these roads are completed, residents can also go on and see, we status it, it's color-coded, green, red, and yellow for like in process, completed. So it's just also, that's available to the public as well, for them to view, to watch the progress of the construction.
Right. And the only other thing I wanted to bring up is that we had a couple of complaints in the last couple of days regarding garbage service not being able to get to the areas that's required, and that was because of the construction. So I recognize that you need to do the work, but if it's going to interfere with our ability to get to the services that we pay for and the residents pay for, that the residents be given enough notice by your communicating with our hauler, that services may be delayed and therefore pickups may need to be altered, because they were complaining, and rightly so, that the roads were officially open according to your guidelines, which is great, but it couldn't fit a truck.
Yeah, to address that situation, and apologize if it inconvenienced anyone with their garbage pickup. But what we'll do on our end as well is, I'm going to have my project manager, we have toolbox talks every morning, talk to our foreman, and to look out for any kind of deliveries. I know we've also had deliveries, Amazon Prime, Fed Express. We do whatever we can to get the people in and get their deliveries. Trash collection, I know, is very important, especially as it gets warmer in the summer. So we will address that. We'll also talk to the police. Sometimes the police, which is good, they're not in their cars. They're out walking around on the job site. So if a driver comes, sees a car, sees the road closed, I could see where a driver could figure, hey, I can't get up that street. But we always have access on our street because we have to get our own vehicles up and down the street, our dump trucks, our utility trucks. So we always have a lane that we can go in and out. So we will do whatever we can so that people have access to the streets.
Great, thank you.